This is 1A. I'm Jenn White. Let's start here. It should go without saying that LGBTQ plus people are just that, people. They're adults and they're teenagers, preteens, grade school kids. They have favorite foods, obsessions with music artists, stories they like to tell over and over, and insecurities, arguments with friends, worries about what their future will look like. They're figuring out their lives like everyone else. But in the realm of politics, some elected officials have turned these identities into a topic to argue about. And in states around the country, LGBTQ plus students are experiencing increasing levels of violence and hate. Coming up, we hear about the Washington Post's reporting on FBI hate crime data. But first, what is it like to be a student right now who identifies as LGBTQ+? What challenges do they feel in their schools, from peers, teachers, and the politicians in the states where they live? And most importantly, what can adults do to help care for and support them? There's a lot to talk about on this issue, but today we focus on one piece, solutions. Joining us from La Crescenta, California, near LA, is Eric Eubank. They're a high school student and they identify as queer and non-binary. They're also a host and co-producer of I'm Feeling Queer Today. It's a podcast with the Future Perfect Project. That's a nonprofit that produces creative workshops and media projects for LGBTQ plus youth. Eric, thanks for joining us, and thank you for waking up early to be on the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And we want to hear your thoughts as well. If you're an LGBTQ plus or questioning young person or their parent, what do you think schools should do to keep kids safe? When it comes to thinking about your future, what do you want from your workplaces and the communities you'll be a part of? Email us at 1a@wamu.org. So Eric, we're meeting you for the first time today. What do you want us to know about who you are?
I mean, I think the little introduction said a lot. I definitely think that my queer identity is a big part of who I am, and also the activism that I try and do, even if it's on a smaller scale. Things like I'm Feeling Queer Today are ways that I kind of express who I am, but also what I care about, and I try and impact the world, even if it's just on a couple of people.
How would you describe what it feels like to be a teen these days, especially at school?
Definitely complicated. I think you said it best. Queer youth are struggling with all of the regular things that teenagers struggle with, whether it's figuring out their futures or just dealing with high school drama and things like that. But on top of that, it's also the fear of the fact that there are lawmakers in our country, even people that might be our neighbors, who don't only not support who we are, but just don't really tolerate it either. And even in places like California, where that's not an active threat necessarily, there's still this lingering fear and apprehension about being queer.
Many of us have heard reports about 16-year-old Nex Benedict. They died in Oklahoma last month, the day after a fight with fellow students in a school bathroom. Nex identified as non-binary, and the state medical examiner there ruled their death a suicide, but a full autopsy report is expected later this month. Eric, how do you process difficult news stories about LGBTQ plus young people?
Yeah, it's definitely hard because, of course, at times it feels like you're kind of powerless with those situations, especially when you're hearing about them after the fact. But I think that one thing that I do is, luckily, I have a large support system at school through my school's GSA, which kind of allows me to discuss this type of issue with my peers who think about it in the same ways, and we also have advisors that are really supportive. So I think just having a group of people that can process it with you does a lot, and it goes a long way.
And the GSA is the school's Gay Straight Alliance, correct?
Yes.
So tell me more about the types of conversations you're having with your peers right now.
Yeah, so stories like Nex Benedict, we discuss kind of the nuances of those, because of course on the surface and most pertinently, there is the level of hate and the more direct actions. We kind of delve into the fact that a lot of the times, especially when it comes to, for example, where I live in California, it's not necessarily direct hate, but more about ignorance. And because of these conversations, we try and kind of spread more awareness and just kind of be aware of our place in our communities and just kind of how we can deal with situations, even if it's not to that magnitude.
How much responsibility do you feel for trying to help people understand who you are and the experience LGBTQ plus youth are having right now? And does it feel like a responsibility, or does it at times feel like a burden?
Well, it can be hard, especially because when there are so many things happening on such a large scale, like across the country and truly across the world, it feels like an individual or some random school in La Crescenta, California, it feels like we don't do that much. We don't have as huge of an impact as we would like, because of course every individual person would love to change the world. But I think that when it comes to the feeling of responsibility, I try and recontextualize it and look at it as, if I can help one person, whether that's helping one queer youth kind of navigate being in part of the LGBTQ community as a child in America now, or if it's I can help one person just be a little more aware and a little bit more accepting, then I think that I've kind of done my job. Because as much as I would like to help everyone, I have to kind of recognize that that responsibility is kind of too big for me at this moment, but I try and do as much as I can.
Here's a comment we got from one of you. I'm a boomer. I graduated high school in 1980. What I would have given to have someone to talk to in my little country school. I might have come out earlier, avoided years of suicidal ideation, and lived a much more healthy life. These knee-jerk conservatives have no idea the damage they are heaping on LGBTQ plus children, ruining lives before they have a chance. We just want to note, if you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, the 988 crisis hotline is available 24/7. You can call 988 to get help. Eric, I want to make sure to point out that not everything is bad or depressing for young people these days. You spend your time on a lot of things. What brings you joy, or what things are you looking forward to?
I mean, I think that I'm definitely looking forward to just kind of being able to kind of live freely in the world as someone who is out, because I definitely have the privilege to do that, and I'm excited to kind of just explore me. But one thing that does bring me joy is, for example, podcasting on I'm Feeling Queer Today, because we delve into, of course, a lot of the pertinent issues to the present day, but we also talk a lot about queer joy and things that we look forward to and things that are positive when it comes to being queer in America.
What's the biggest thing you've learned in doing that podcast and talking to other young people?
I mean, because it's produced and hosted by people across the country, I definitely think that the different perspectives on everything that's happening, both good and bad, has been something that's been really eye-opening, because I've gotten to interact with so many people that I never really would have talked to before. And I think I've definitely learned the fact that there can be so many different perspectives on an issue, even with such similar people.
How are you thinking about what it means to form community, both right now and as you move into adulthood?
I think community is a lot about solidarity. It's standing up for, but also standing with the people who you are forming community with. And I think right now, of course, that looks a lot different because I'm in high school and it's with other students and often a more organized setting. But I think in the future, I'm hoping that whether it's joining a community or forming one, that I can kind of see that same support that I have in my little microcosm of high school now.
And what makes you feel most supported, especially in school?
I think it's when there are not necessarily figures of authority, but just people outside of my direct community that are showing support. I think when that support and that allyship is louder than the noise expressed by the hate and the ignorance that's happening everywhere and within my community, I think that's something that makes me feel so supportive.
What kinds of misconceptions or misunderstandings do you find adults and other young people have about the way of approaching identity and labels that you take?
I think misconception often comes from rigidity and kind of staunch, narrow perspectives of how people should act or behave or identify. And while I think that the LGBTQ community, and especially queer youth and Gen Z, are becoming a lot more fluid with how they express themselves and how they identify, I think these misconceptions come a lot from kind of narrower perspectives on those things.
I don't know that you've had a chance to sit across a table from a lawmaker in your state, but if you could, and you could have a conversation with them about what they can do to support LGBTQ plus youth, what would you tell them?
I mean, of course, California is a lot different than a lot of the other states that have more direct legislation against queer youth. But I think in general, what I would tell a lawmaker is, I mean, obviously, not to make laws that hurt queer and especially trans youth, but more like reasonably. I would definitely kind of discuss the idea that they should be using their platform as a form of activism, not necessarily through the laws they make, but what they say and how they interact with people and how they talk to the country or the state as a whole.
That's Eric Eubank. They're a high school student in California who identifies as queer and non-binary. They're also a host and co-producer of the podcast I'm Feeling Queer Today, made by the Future Perfect Project, a media nonprofit for LGBTQ plus youth. Eric, thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you.